Hello and welcome to BusyWorksBeats.com. This is Music Theory Essentials, and in this course we're going to be going over not only the essentials, but some advanced technique you can apply right away for some cool music theory sound. So in this video, we're going to go over chord sequencing using pseudo-leading tones. So in the course prior, Music Theory in a Day, and especially in chord magic, we talk about the pseudo-leading tone. It's the tone you hear in your head that sticks out from a chord. Now, you may not know every note within a chord, but you hear that tone. So an easy way we created to figure out the chord associated with that tone is called reverse engineering, and we go over that in chord magic. So we're going to be using a lot of the techniques from the previous courses and putting those together for this video. And this video is going to go over chord sequencing. Now, we're going to also use the new technology of borrowed chords. Okay, so we're going to be using two different understandings all combined into one video. So let's start with just the tone that we hear in our head. So I'm going to pick a random key and I'm going to cycle through by going with the tone my head wants to hear next. Okay, and it doesn't matter which culture you grew up in. We have expectations for music. You know, we expect a different tone to follow a certain note. So for example, F, I want to hear G afterwards. Okay, so those are the tones I heard in my head in sequence. So now the question is, how do we build chords using these tones, working backwards, also using the borrowed chord technology? So we have here from the previous video of borrowed chords, let me go into the other screen. We have the A natural minor scale mapped out with the associated chords, okay, associated triads, 3-note chords. And then we have the A major scale. Okay, so borrowed chords, remember, are taking two different scales with the same root note. In this case, the same root note is A, and they're two different scales. We have A minor, and then we have A major. Okay, so they're two different scale types. And we went over that video in borrowed chords, so you can go back and check that video. So right now we just have leading tones in our mind. Now keep in mind, if you haven't watched the borrowed chords video, I suggest you go back and watch that, because we go over how to select chords. Okay, so for example, my ear wants to hear F. Now F can be the top note of a triad, it could be the middle note of a triad, it could be the bottom portion of a chord. So you have to ask yourself, which part of a chord is it? Is it the top? Is it the bottom? Or could it be the middle? Because reverse engineering, you have to know where you're starting to reverse engineer. And we go over that in chord magic. So anyway, let's say F, for example. I'm just going to show you the multiple reasonings behind this. So F could be the top note. Okay, so if it's F is the top note, we look for chords which have F as the top note. Okay, so that's going to be B, D, F, and you can't see it because I covered it up. So B, D, F, okay, and that's B diminished. And let me stretch it over here to the A major scale. We don't have any chords associated. So the only chord within these two scales would be B, D, F, if F was the top note. So the question is this the chord I was hearing? In my head, no, that's not the chord I heard. So F may not be the top note, okay? F could be the middle note. So if F is the middle note, we have to look for chords which have F as the middle note, which is D, F, A, which is D minor. You can see it here in the gray, D, F, A. Let's see where else F is incorporated. Now it looks like in the major scale, we don't have any notes with F, okay? So you have to ask again, okay, if it's not the middle note or the top note, maybe it's the bottom note. So you have to ask which chord has F as the bottom note. In this case, it's going to be F major, which is F, A, C. F, A, C, okay? So those are options for this one note. So you have to really know where this note sits within a chord, and you're gonna have to try each of those options to figure out which one sounds best to you. So I'm assuming this is the bottom note. So let's work our way up instead of backwards. So right now the only chord that had F as a root note is F major. Let me see here. But what I'm going to do is treat this like I inverted this bottom F upward. So I'm going to hit Control down. Okay, so it's kind of like me taking this F down here and flipping it up an octave or inverting it. Okay, but I just put the notes lower. So that's what I'm doing there. So it's F, A, C, but I inverted the F. So also you have inversion. So not only do you have scales, not only do you have middle, top parts of the chords or the bottom chord, you have to think about inversion. So it gets pretty complex. But what I suggest you do is just listen to the mood it gives off, and then you can work your way creating more options later. So does it create the mood you want for that specific note? So let's do the same thing. Okay, it was F, A, C, which is F major. I inverted the F, so it's up top now instead of the bottom. So the next chord following that logic is going to be G, B, D, or let's check the other scale, which doesn't use G. So the only scale here, since we're using root notes as our functionality, okay, and we're listening to the root notes, G is the next root note, okay? So you have to start a, I don't know the proper word. I was going to say dogma. That doesn't make sense. You have to create your own approach, okay? So what I'm trying to say before we move on is that since I established that F is the root note of the chord, then G has to be the root note of the next chord, okay? It's going to have a more chance of being that root note. So every one of these notes in sequence are all root notes for their chord. Okay, now if F was the top note of a chord, which it's not here, remember I just inverted this. This is not the top of a chord. If F was the top of the chord, then G would be the top of the next chord. A would be the top of the next. Okay, and that's how you look through the rest of your chords. So since F is a root note, we're treating everything else like it's the root note of a chord. Okay, but also we inverted the other notes. So that's our formula for the sequence. So for G, the only chord we can build with a root note of G is G, B, D, which is G major. And we're going to invert the G, so it's at top, on top. And that sounds like a kind of like an 80s trip music. Okay, so the next chord, A. Okay, so we're going to treat A like it's the root note. And you have to ask yourself, not only is A the root note in the A natural minor scale, but the A major scale as well. So it could be A major or A minor in this case. So here's where you have options. So you just have to listen to which one sounds cooler to you. So remember, we're inverting the A up. So in general, it looks like this. All these chords look like this, but we're inverting the bass notes or the root notes up. Okay, so now we have to ask ourselves, does A minor sound cool, or should we make A major? I like the A minor tone, but this could also be A major. So looking at A major, what's the chord structure? It's A, C sharp, and then E. So moving that one note up. Now let me invert the A so we can hear it in context. So that sounds actually cleaner than the other note. You know, it gives you two different feelings, okay? You can even be more complex and have both of those play. So you can have the C change to C sharp. But that doesn't sound too cool right now, so let's just pick either or. I like the duh. I like that sound because if I choose C sharp, it feels like we're going up further. And it feels like we're not settling at a location. It feels like the energy's going up. But whereas if I pick C, it feels like we're kind of plateauing a little bit. Okay, I just like that tone. So both of those work. Okay, so here's where you can use the borrowed chords, reverse engineering, and, you know, inversions to complete a chord progression, a chord sequence, all by using the pseudo leading tone. So you can see how all these concepts stack on each other to make more complex scenarios. And you can always, you know, use different techniques here and there. So the next chord, G sharp, we have to figure out which scale has G sharp as the root note. It's not going to be in the A natural minor scale because that uses all white notes, and G sharp is a black key. So we're going to have to look over here to the A major scale, and we can see G sharp is definitely in the scale, and the chord with this as the root note is G, B, G sharp, B, and D. So that's the chord. And again, we're going to invert the G sharp so it's on top. Okay, so that's the only option we have here. Now G can also be, that rhymed, it can also be the top note of a chord. So let's see if that sounds better. It doesn't, every note in this pseudo leading tone sequence doesn't have to be the root note. It can also be top note or the middle note. So we have to consider those chords as well if it doesn't sound good right off the bat, using the same formula, which is take the root note, invert it, and yeah, it's pretty much all we did there. Okay, so now I'm looking at the C sharp minor chord. Okay, and you have to ask yourself, does that sound better than the G minor chord? I think that's G minor. 0, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, G minor. I like the tension there, but let's choose a different chord. Okay, so that's the C sharp chord. That has G sharp in it. And let's also look for the next chord, which is E, G sharp, B, which is E major. So let's try that chord out. Now keep in mind, G sharp is in the middle, not the top or the bottom. Now I like the sound, but it sounds a little too like we're going up in too much high frequency. So we're going to invert the B there, okay, down an octave. Now I like that sound. It flows a lot more. The reason it flows, we have two notes back to back, which is E, okay, and that's one of the, I think we go over in chord magic, when you have notes in two different chords that are the same. For example, the E in both of these chords, A minor and E major, when you have those back-to-back notes, it creates tension, okay? And chord progressions are all about tension and release. Now that just flows a lot smoother than any of the other chords. So you can see how G might not be the top note. It might not be the bottom note. It may just be the middle note, okay? So we have to work around our understandings. So the formula is not going to work all the way through based on the first chord, but all these techniques can get you through just in case it doesn't work, okay? So the next formula, okay, we're going to assume A is the root note. And again, we have choices of A major or A minor. Let's try A minor first. Now remember, we inverted the A, so it's going to be on top, not the bottom. I do like that sound. It sounds really good. So the next chord, we could choose C major because that's the only chord in our mapped out scales that has C as the root note. Okay, and we're going to again invert the C so that it's on top of the chord. Okay, so I hear a note in my head that needs to be in this chord, so let's figure that out. So my ear wants to hear the note D, okay? So always go by your ear. Even if, you know, the formulas and the scales don't make sense, okay? My ear wants to hear the note D. So I'm going to add, in addition to the chord, I'm going to add that note because my ear is expecting to hear it. So we're still going to use C major, which is C, E, G, okay? But I added a D in there. Now it doesn't have to be the loudest in velocity too. It could be subtle. You know, note all these velocities are the same. When you're playing real keys, you're going to play them at different velocities, which gives more emphasis on certain notes. Now my ear hears a little tension around D and E. So you can, at this point, omit. Now again, look at all these notes in a row, E. It's a lot of tension going on. So I can actually omit a note, and this is another technique we go over in chord magic, omitting notes out of chords. And that chord fits perfectly, okay? So these are the techniques you want to look into. Of course, chord sequences have a guideline, but sometimes you're going to edit those guidelines, okay? So that's why we say music theory is a structure, but then you break out of that structure at some points. Even though we're not breaking out of the structure, we're really just expanding on the structure, okay? So all these techniques come together: omission, inversion, adding that pseudo leading tone, and going with the laid out chords for you. Okay, so this stuff works and it sounds great. So now you have to ask, what does your ear hear next? Now my ear wants to hear E regardless of whatever's going on in the chord. So we're adding another pseudo leading tone because my ear's starting to pick up on these bottom notes and it's starting to guide me with those bottom notes. So we have to succumb to the, you know, what our mind's telling us, because that's going to create the smoothest chord progression. So my ear wants to hear that E regardless of whatever chord we use. So anyway, from the chord options, the chord starting with D in this case, I don't think D is in the major scale. Oh yeah, it is. So we have D, F sharp A. So we can choose now D major or D minor. So you have to make a choice. Let's start with D minor, okay, and then we're gonna swap it out for D major. So again, we're gonna invert the chord so that D is the top note. Now keep in mind, these notes that are very close to each other are gonna sound chaotic sometimes. Some notes which are close together don't always sound chaotic. Now that sounded chaotic, okay, because they're very close to each other. So the question is, our ear wanted to hear E, so E has to be in this chord. So the logic answer is to delete the F or omit it so that it's not in the chord. Let's try it out now. Okay, so that gave us a cleaner tone. But also remember that we had two chord options, D minor and D major. Okay, so it could be D F A or D F sharp A. So let's just try the major form and keep the F in there. Okay, now it sounds good, but the thing is there's a lot of velocity fighting. So I'm going to lower the velocities here and see if they blend a little bit better. Now I think if I soften out this chord, it's going to blend a little bit more. Okay, it blended a lot cleaner. Let's just take some of these bottom notes and lower the velocity. Okay, I do like those tones together. There's some tension, but remember, chord progressions and chord sequences are all about tension and release. So the points of tension so far are right here. Remember, back-to-back notes within the chords create tension, and right here with these two notes being so close together. So that creates tension in this whole chord progression. Everything else is smooth running. Okay. Now my ear from this F sharp wants to hear A. So A is in this next chord regardless. Okay. So now we're going to start with E. Remember, we have different options here. E in the major scale is going to create E major, whereas E in the minor scale for A minor is going to create E minor. So again, if you're confused about some terms and getting through this process, you really have to watch these videos in sequence and the courses in sequence: Music Theory in a Day, Chord Magic, and then Melody Magic, and then the bonus videos starting with borrowed chords, and then this video, so you have a better understanding of all the terminology and what we're using in technique. So now we're going to map out E minor, which is E, G, B. Okay, and we're going to invert the notes. I do like the energy of this chord, especially that B note. So I want the B note to be kind of loud, but not too loud. And let's lower the velocity of G. So here's where velocity takes a key in the chord sequence. I just like that ambiguous tone, like you're not used to it. I like that. Now also what you could do is add bass notes. So we didn't even get into that. So you can see how all these techniques are starting to stack on each other. We're using pseudo leading tones. We're using chord codes. We're using scale maps. We're using, sorry, I'm grabbing a chair. We're using, what else did we use? You know, inversions. Okay. And you can see how it creates a mindset of how to approach chord progressions. And it all started from simply mapping out two different scales. Okay. I do like that tone. Okay. It's very unusual. Now what I want to do though is add a bass note to kind of make it thicker and more low frequency, so that we have a little more support. Okay, so I'm going to add the note C as a bass note. Okay, now C is not anywhere in the chord, E, G, B, which is E minor. Okay, but keep in mind, remember chord expansions, we can expand the chord. So if I were to expand E minor, for example, which is E, now I'm using the A natural minor scale, E, G, B, then it would be skip C, go to D. Okay, and then it would be skip E, go to F, skip G, go to A. So this is the E, this is the 7th here, this is the 9th, this is the 11th. So this is E11, E minor 11. Okay, that's the full chord. Now some of those notes are used in this chord here. We have the A, we have the B, we have the E and the G, and E into the G, getting tongue twisted here. And if we were to go to the next note, it'd be C. Okay, so this is the E minor 13th, which is rarely used. But you can see we use the same notes in this chord here. It's just that they're spread out differently. And we came up with this structure based on different things. Remember, my ear wants to hear a certain bass note. My ear wants to hear certain leading tones. And then you add the original chord, and then you figure out the velocity structure as well. Okay, so these notes are all within this chord. Now, this isn't the E minor 13th chord, but it has certain elements. Omitting certain notes, like the F was omitted, the D was omitted, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so these are all the notes within the chord. So this is technically the E minor 13th chord omitting the 7th and the 9th. Okay, if you wanted to be super technical about the name. Okay, so that's what omission can do in hindsight. So we omitted without even knowing we were omitting. Okay, so that's what I'm saying here. It's simple once you understand all the concepts. Okay, I just like that chord progression. It sounds great. Now, of course, you want more realistic playing styles. I'm going to put it on strum mode just to exaggerate some stuff. Now also, let me see. Let's work on the velocity. Okay, so that might be more realistic. Okay, so you can see the applications here using chord sequencing technologies. Okay, and we used the other technologies of borrowed chords. We used the scale code technology. We used the chord code just to verify certain names. We used the inversion technology. We used pseudo leading tone technology. We used the bass note addition technology, and we used omitting. Okay, so all those can combine to create really unique chord progressions, and this is how you're going to break out of the box of just regular chords. Okay, so thanks for watching today. It's busyworksbeats.com.